Okay, let's dive right into this fascinating explainer. Today, we are unpacking a highly specific, deeply intricate philosophical guide written by an author named Zhu Feng. It's essentially a text that outlines exactly what is required for humanity to cross over into what he calls the new era. Think of it as an 18-point checklist, but for a completely new state of human consciousness. Whether you're super into esoteric philosophies or just kind of fascinated by how different thinkers build frameworks for human evolution, this source material offers a radically structured blueprint. We're going to break down these 18 points and translate some pretty profound, sometimes very demanding concepts into clear takeaways. So let's get started. To really wrap our heads around this complex worldview, we have to start right here at its core premise. The source text operates on the absolute belief that the Earth is undergoing a mandatory cosmic purification. And look, this isn't framed as some gentle, gradual shift. The text literally uses the word sweeping, stating that a massive cleanup of the planet, meaning its atmosphere, its plants, animals, and especially human minds, is bound to happen. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that this purification isn't something humanity can stop, control, or even negotiate with. It is presented as an evolutionary law of the universe. And according to the text, our only option is to adapt. And that right there brings us to the central tension of this entire guide. The source outlines that your survival during this cosmic sweeping depends entirely on abandoning your current mindset. You simply cannot bring old luggage into the new home. Which, leads us to ask a pretty monumental question. If surviving this transition requires tossing out almost everything we currently believe about ourselves and the world, is humanity actually ready for such a radical rewrite? Can we just shed our old consciousness on command? Let's move into Section 1, a new cosmic paradigm, or upgrading your worldview. Right out of the gate, the text makes a non-negotiable demand regarding theology and science. Dominant modern worldviews, like atheism and the theory of evolution, have to be completely abandoned. But it doesn't just tell readers to revert back to traditional religions. It actually requires repudiating the Old Testament God as well. Instead, all of this gets replaced by a singular new concept: the greatest creator. It is a literal wiping of the slate regarding how we are supposed to understand the origins of life. And this shift goes from our cosmic origins right down to our deeply personal identities. Think for a second about how you define yourself. Usually it's by your ego, your family tree, your religious group, or your nationality, right? Well, the source material demands that these familiar comforts, these primary building blocks of who we are, must be entirely dissolved. They are viewed as limiting boundaries. In their place, you have to adopt what's called a unified global citizen consciousness. You're no longer defined by your country's borders or your bloodline, but strictly by your membership in a singular planetary community. To do that, we hit the ultimate philosophical flip. Look, most of us operate on the assumption that the physical world, the reality around us, shapes our minds. If it's pouring rain, we feel gloomy. Our environment dictates our internal state. The text demands you reverse this entirely. You must shift to the absolute belief that your consciousness actively creates your reality. It's a huge transition from being just a passive observer of a physical universe to recognizing yourself as the active creator of it through your mindset. Finally, wrapping up this macro-level paradigm shift, we look at how events unfold. In everyday life, we are constantly chalking things up to bad luck, random chance, or accidental encounters, disorder and fortuity. Well, in the new era consciousness, there is absolutely zero room for randomness. Every single thing, according to the text, must be viewed through a strict lens of causality and inevitable cosmic order. If an event happens, it was inevitable. It's a universe bound by perfect cause and effect, completely throwing out the concept of coincidence. All right, moving on to Section 2, Redefining Life and Death, where we explore the spiritual mechanics of all this. According to the text, we have to fundamentally accept that life isn't just physical. It is a strict dual existence. You have your material entity, your physical body, and your spiritual one. But the source material takes this a fascinating step further, insisting that because of this duality, extraterrestrial life absolutely exists across different levels of this spectrum. We have to acknowledge that the flesh and blood life we see here on Earth is just one tiny, specific frequency in a universe that is basically teeming with different levels of biological and spiritual existence. Building on that unseen spiritual reality, the text maps out a very literal, highly structured existence of heaven and hell. It doesn't leave heaven as some vague, cloudy concept. It specifically organizes it into three distinct escalating realms. There's the 1,000-year world, above that the 10,000-year world, and finally the absolute highest realm, Elysium. It treats the afterlife with the organizational detail of a celestial map. Because of this highly structured, multi-tiered universe, the whole concept of death undergoes a major rebranding. Death is reframed not as a final stop or some tragic end to existence. Instead, it is quite literally just a transit point. It's the beginning of a new journey, where your spiritual entity simply moves along the cosmic map to its next destination, which is entirely dependent on how you lived. Which brings us to what might be the most specific and fascinating concept in the entire text: the non-material structure. Think of this as your spiritual DNA or a metaphysical scaffolding. The text states that your future, whether you end up in a beautiful upper realm like Elysium or stuck in a deficient, painful existence, is entirely determined by whether you have built a perfect or an ugly non-material structure with your own hands during your lifetime. And how is that structure actually graded? Well, rather than waiting for one massive, terrifying final judgment day at the end of time, the source insists on a much more immediate reality. Judgment is ongoing, it's everywhere, and it's happening all the time. Your non-material structure is being judged and shaped constantly by every single action, thought, and interaction every single day. It's essentially a universe of continuous, real-time spiritual auditing. Okay, let's look at the practical application in Section 3, Rules for Global Citizens, and the necessary behavioral shift. So, how do you do it? The text outlines a remarkably strict law of equivalent exchange. To elevate your spiritual quality, or as the text phrases it, to sublimate the quality of your life, you have to actively manipulate the cosmic scales. The rule is simple, but really demanding. You must sow more than you reap. You have to constantly contribute more to the world around you while actively asking for less in return. This deliberate imbalance is how you actually accumulate the merit required to cross into the new era. To achieve this, the text introduces a mathematical concept to teach a spiritual lesson: the Mobius net principle. Just like a Mobius strip has only one continuous side, totally blurring the line between inside and outside, you are required to unify opposites in your own mind. This means entirely giving up your criticisms and judgments of the world. Good and bad, right and wrong, you have to stop separating them and stop judging others, and instead see everything as part of a unified, necessary whole. Now, this one is in stark contrast to modern culture. We constantly celebrate individualism, ambition, and elite achievement, right? While the text demands the complete abandonment of what it calls personal heroism and elite consciousness. If you want to enter the new home, you cannot think of yourself as special or above anyone else. You have to actively lower yourself to the humblest, most unassuming position possible. In this framework, pride is viewed as absolute spiritual poison. Furthermore, this new global citizen has to interact with the world through a lens of absolute radical pacifism. You are required to treat everything kindly and to permanently discard any instinct for attack or revenge. Even if you are wronged, the new era consciousness does not retaliate. Sincerity, kindness, and virtue must be your default. Actually, scratch that. They must be your only reactions, actively perfecting that inner non-material structure we talked about earlier. Let's move to our final leg, Section 4, Packing for the Journey, where we prepare for departure. I love this everyday metaphor because it brings the cosmic right down to the practical. Just as you physically cannot travel to a foreign country with the correct valid documents in your packed bag, you absolutely cannot enter the new era if you're still carrying the heavy, outdated consciousness of the old world. Your mindset, these exact 18 points, is your passport and your visa. Without them, you simply do not cross the border. The text also issues a bluntly practical warning to close out the guide. It states that humanity has to proactively resonate with this coming cosmic shift. You have to do the work yourself. The source notes, with a bit of dry reality, that you shouldn't just sit around waiting for a personalized invitation. As the text puts it, few of us are great enough to be served directly by the greatest creator. You have to align your frequency on your own initiative long before the sweeping actually arrives. As we wrap up this explainer, we are left to ponder a seriously provocative thought. This text asks for a total dismantling of ego, of nationality, of scientific assumptions, and of modern ambition. It asks us to view ourselves as eternal architects of our own spiritual structures. So looking at the demands of the new era, are we truly capable of rewriting our entire reality to align with this cosmic consciousness? Or are we permanently anchored to the heavy luggage of the old world? It's a massive question to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the 18 points, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.